Eddie said that I shoved him, and for the first time, I was thinking, thank God for cameras. During the week, we were warned repeatedly by Frazer's team around what gloves could be being used, and Canelo could be next. Talks have begun.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment we've all been waiting for.
Here at Betfred, we're passionate about our sport, and I'm proud to announce a partnership with Boxxer. I'm looking forward to working with Benn and his team and being back on Sky Sports Boxing.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Betfred and Boxxer, this is a great moment. Betfred, a company that have been around for over 50 years, a company that was born out of Manchester just like ourselves. Fred Doan and Betfred, who have supported boxing for many, many years, now partnering with Boxxer. And just in time for this Saturday, Adam Azim against Ohara Davies at the Copper Box. What a way to start.
Let's get this party started!
Okay, so I just wanted to ask you about Boxxer's recent announcement, a huge partnership with Betfred. How does it feel to come into the fold?
Oh, it feels great. I have to say, Betfred's a brand, obviously growing up in Manchester, and you hear about Fred Doan and his story. It was aspirational for me starting a business. And I remember one of our first office spaces was actually down the road from a Betfred store. And when we first did our Ultimate Boxer events, which were a long time ago, there was a couple of events we did on Lad Bible and Unilad. And I remember driving to Warrington in my old Vauxhall Astra and sitting in that car park and waiting and hoping to get a meeting that I'd been promised with. It was a marketing manager there at the time. And we managed to get a very, very small deal over the line. But I remember coming home, it was the first ever sponsorship deal of any sort that I'd done. And I was over the moon. And so to fast forward now, 6 or 7 years later now, to be able to do a real partnership with Betfred, one that they're really excited about, we're really excited about, in a sport that they've always supported, is huge for me. And really big moment for the business as well.
We're thrilled to have you as part of the team. Somebody who wasn't thrilled last week, you might know where I'm going to go with this. You got under a certain Mr. Frank Warren's skin. A little bit of a clash, a little bit of a moment between you two at the weigh-in. Do you want to talk us through what happened there, what was said?
Yeah, I mean, look, for those that don't know too much about boxing, we're a young promotional company that have grown really fast, and it's an old established industry that the same sort of couple of guys have been running for a long time, and that shows. I think we were over there last week, and they were the usual promoter tricks of you mustn't come here and you mustn't come there and you've not got a ticket and you're being dropped off in the wrong place. And so for us, it got to the point where our fighters were getting confused, and as agreed that we'd agreed with Queensberry, it was Ben Shalom would be with the fighters and represent Boxxer with his fighters, and Frank would do it with his fighters, and Eddie would do it with their fighters. And I think there was a wink before as I got on stage, and they tried, as they had on previous events, to try and make sure that I couldn't get near my fighters and do the face-off with them. By the way, I think the whole thing's ridiculous anyway, and really promoters shouldn't really be anywhere around that. But given they were, it was within our right. And obviously you saw Frank lose his cool and decide to. I think Eddie said that I shoved him, and for the first time I was thinking, thank God for cameras. We got a bit of an insight there into what it's like behind the scenes, and the push is there for everyone to see.
And is there an underlying frustration? You've said about being a young business going up against like the old order a little bit. Is it frustrating that Eddie and Frank try to sometimes literally, but also figuratively elbow you out in some?
I think, look, I sometimes believe any business, any established business, I'm sure Fred had when he first started, I'm sure there were gambling companies or gambling brands that didn't want him involved or didn't want him to do well. But I think in boxing, because it's such a closed shop, because it's all in the public eye, you're seeing it a lot more vividly. It's a lot more overt than perhaps you would see in other businesses. And that's all it is. It's not personal. They've been running the sport for 40 or 50 years. They're not going to like anyone coming in. And there's a reason why no one's been able to break into the market before. And obviously we've worked extremely hard to do so. And I think it gets to the stage eventually where they have to work with you and fights have to be made. And then becomes a level of acceptance. I think a year ago or 2 years ago, there's no way they'd even be doing fights with us. So that's testament to the fighters that we've built and the platform that we've built. That I think, over time things become easier. But it's when you say it's frustrating, I think it's to be expected, and it's just something that you have to push through.
And you talk about working together there, making fights. After what happened with Frank, any appetite for a 5 versus 5 against Queensberry, perhaps? They're quite good at those.
I love to. I think he's on a very, very good run at the moment, which is probably why his egos, is where it is right now. And we'd love to do that fight. We'd love to do a boxer against Queensberry. But it takes two to tango, and we'll see what happens. But we're in a good space. We've had a lot of boxer Queensberry fights, even if not nights recently, and I think it's got to a point where with Turki Al Sheikh's involvement and Riyadh Season's involvement, where they probably don't like the politics, don't want to get involved in the politics, and now you're seeing fights being forced to be made that otherwise wouldn't be made. But a boxer Queensberry show, I'm sure, is one that can get made in the future, and obviously it'll be very tasty between the two businesses.
And obviously Ben Shalom versus Frank-Warren wasn't the only altercation of the weekend. You were front and centre, Neymar was front and centre, which I'll never quite get my head around. Chris Eubank Jr., Conor, Benn faced off with each other. What did you make of the war of words between those two born rivals?
Well, Neymar's part of the Eubank team, and he's a big supporter of Chris and has been for a while now. They've played poker a lot over in the States, and they've developed a great relationship, and it was great for Neymar to come down and support Chris. I think one thing I've noticed when I speak to Chris about potential fights is his reaction when we mention Conor Benn. It's become personal for him. I think it was born rivals when the first fight happened or was supposed to happen. But I think everything that happened that week, everything that's been said since, everything that happened in the lead up involving other people, it was a very tough moment in Chris Eubank Jr.'s career, making weight, not having a fight, being perhaps misled how he thought he was misled, and then getting to the point where fight doesn't actually happen, and then there's the whole carry on, and then he's getting dragged into this and that. It's become very personal for him now, and I think he genuinely prioritizes that fight because of that. And I think it's a different fight to what it would have been 2 years ago. I think so much has happened, as we know, and I think Chris has kept his dignity and kept his character throughout, but he can't wait to get his hands on Conor Benn. He really can't, and I think that's what you saw there. And look, we just hope that for Chris's sake, Conor's able to, and for British boxing's sake, Conor's able to get his license soon. He's done a 2-year ban, probably dealt with it in a different way to what many people think he should. But hopefully that chapter closes and we can put on one of the biggest fights that this country's ever seen.
And obviously after what happened with the first one, with the failed drugs test, is there any measures that you would want put in place to protect Chris ahead of such a fight? Is there anything, would you perhaps be cautious and want any extra measures put in there just to prevent a repeat of the first time?
Look, I'd be very surprised if those circumstances were going to be to repeat themselves, but definitely BARDA testing and open BARDA testing. But also the weight, I think, is going to be different this time. It's going to be 160 rather than that ridiculous 157, 158 and the rehydration clause, which actually made it extremely dangerous for Chris. And again, that's what added so much to his anger, that he'd gone through all that he'd gone to a completely unnatural way that probably affected him actually in the first Billam-Smith fight. He was coming off the back of 2 weight cuts, and so this time it'd be a sensible weight at 160, which is still hard enough for Chris to make. I think VADA testing will be in place, of course, again, and we should this time get a fair fight, and that's all you can hope for. That's all you can expect, and hopefully we can put all that nonsense behind us.
And there's one other name that always seems to come out of Chris Eubank Jr.'s mouth, an ambition that he seems to have had for many, many years now. That is obviously Saul Canelo Alvarez. Is it as simple as beat Benn and then Canelo's next?
Canelo could be next now. We were talking about doing the fight in September. It came too late. It came when Chris had been out the ring a year. Now that he's had that fight, now that he knows where he's at, now that he feels fresh, talks have, begun in a very, very small way about Canelo's next fight. I mean, if you're Canelo and you want a big fight and you want a fight that crosses over and possibly a transatlantic fight that interests the UK fans as well, there's no one bigger than Chris Eubank Jr. And you've seen the way he built last week. He became the star of the show, despite Beterbiev being on it, despite Wardley-Clarke being on it. He became the star. That's what he does. And so you can imagine the size of the fight with Chris Eubank Jr. and Canelo on the same press conference, the build-up, the press conference in the UK, the press conference in the US. For the first time, who knows, maybe the UK fans get to see Canelo in the flesh. I think that's very attractive to Canelo. And I do expect that fight to happen. And if for whatever reason the license is prolonged or the issue is prolonged with Conor Benn, I can see that fight being next.
And just to confirm, you would consider trying to bring that to the UK as well, the fight itself?
We would love to. It just comes down to money, really. Can the UK generate as much as what Canelo would naturally earn in the US? And I believe the gate can be huge. I believe it sells out Wembley Stadium. I believe it's an enormous event. I think Canelo would be interested in it. So we have had those talks prior. It didn't quite work for the dates that we were looking at last time because obviously Anthony Joshua was facing Daniel Dubois at Wembley Stadium. And so it was off the cards for that day. But I definitely think it's a possibility. There or Vegas, which is Chris's second home, hopefully for the Cinco de Mayo weekend.
And just touching on one of the other big talking points from this weekend, how is Benn Whittaker after his fall from the ring against Liam Cameron?
Yeah, he's not in a good place because he's a perfectionist and he knows he didn't perform and he knows that he wasn't right. I mean, his timing and his energy levels just weren't what they used to be. He never gets hit with those sort of shots. He's a completely different fighter to what he's shown. So he's devastated. But these things happen in sportsmen's career, especially at the top level. And for me, I'm looking at this moment to be a watershed moment. I'm looking at this moment to be a moment that he looks back on and is so grateful that he had. Because for all the attention, for all the millions of followers, for all the fame that he's got so early on in his career, what really matters is how dedicated, how much time are you putting in, how are you developing, what's your team around you like. These are the things that really matter. And I think this is a big wake-up call that you can't just turn up and expect to do the business without the right game plan and without the right preparation. So we'll look into what happened, but believe me, that was not the Benn Whittaker that everyone knows. And I think a lot of people are preying on his downfall, and I do feel for him because not many people can relate to the level of fame that he's got to at such a young age, to the level of scrutiny that he has so early on in his career when he's learning. Appreciate it comes with the style, it comes with the personality, it comes with the territory. But equally, he's a young man that will learn a lot from that experience, and I believe it's going to be a moment that we look back on with that we're grateful for happening.
And another fighter who picked up an injury at the weekend and might be looking to hit the comeback trail is Big Frazer Clarke. How is he doing after what looked like a horrific injury against Fabio Wardley?
It was a terrible injury. It was one moment in my career where I genuinely, nothing else matters in that moment. When I saw that happen, I think I was really looking forward to the main event, and we immediately went to the hospital, and it was a horrible moment for everyone that's close to Big Fraze. He got caught, he switched off, and that's what can happen in heavyweight boxing. Could this referee have stopped it when he got spun round and had his back to it? I thought that was dangerous. Maybe. No excuses. He got caught and took a big punch, but he'll come again. The main thing is he's healthy. His brain is intact. He's back with his family. He had a horrific break, but that was caused by That was caused by a vicious punch. We'll look at what the glove situation was there. I won't get too much into it, but there was a lot of talk during the week as to the gloves that were being worn by Fabio Wardley. The doctor said to me, there's no way in hell any boxing glove should be able to have that level of damage. But it was a clinical end to the fight by Fabio Wardley. But as I say, anything can happen in heavyweight boxing. Frazer will learn for it, and he's got a massive career ahead.
And you mentioned the glove situation there. So is that something, are the gloves themselves going to be looked at and reviewed? Is that something that you've asked for?
Yes, it's something that we are looking at very carefully at the moment with our team. Not just for Big Frazer's sake, but these customised gloves that are starting to get introduced. The word customised, the fact that they're different, you've got to look at it. And as I say, I'm not going to get too much into it because it's an ongoing process, but during the week, we were warned repeatedly by Frazer's team around what gloves could be being used, and that's no excuse. Frazer lost the fight fair and square. It's the damage that can cause, and it will, and that will have to be looked at. But as I say, I take nothing away from Fabio Wardley. Class act, class performance, class finish, and that's just something that we'll look at going forward.
And to pivot from the events of last weekend to the events of this weekend, Adam Azim steps into the copper box for what I think is the biggest fight of his career so far, Ohara Davies. Why is it the perfect time to put this fight on now, then?
Oh, it's a huge fight. Listen, it's a massive step up. We expected to be fighting Harlem Eubank. We had to find an equivalent. For me, Ohara Davies is a bigger name, has achieved far more in the sport, and he's a tougher test. It's a huge test for Adam Azim. Make no mistake. We've seen what can happen in one round. In boxing, anything can happen. Ohara Davies lost in the first round last time out for an interim world title. That doesn't take away what a talented fighter he is. Huge punch power. It's a big test for Adam. This is a moment for him to really create his moment, really announce himself on the world scene as a star in the making. And look, there'll be a lot of pressure on his shoulders for Saturday night. He's a phenomenal talent. There's been a lot of talk about him ever since he turned over. He's got a fantastic team, fantastic trainer. And we'll see. It's a great fight. Ohara is coming to win as well, and it's a huge fight for him. So just a great fight for British boxing that many will feel can go either way.
And I personally think Azim is one of the best prospects in the country at the moment. I'm interested, speaking as his promoter, how far do you think Adam Azim can go?
You have to take one fight at a time. And as we've seen with Ben Whittaker, there's going to be bumps in the road. You look at any fighter, any world-class fighter from yesteryear, it was never plain sailing. There's always ups and downs. And so we have to take one fight at a time. But his talent, his speed, his dedication is all pointing towards an absolute star of the sport at a world-class level that will win multiple world titles. He's 22 years old. And I think, again, people forget that. What were you doing at 22? What was I doing at 22? This kid is headlining on Sky Sports against elite fighters with a huge amount of pressure. And sometimes I just want to take a little bit of pressure off him in that sense. Like, he's been gifted from God with a huge talent, but he's still a young boy. And what he's doing is should be commended. And hopefully he has a fantastic night on Saturday night.
And someone else looking for a fantastic night on Saturday, Dan Azeez. gets his chance at a European title. After the Buatsi loss, after a draw the last time out, is this make or break for Dan Azeez?
I guess it is. I think I never like to say that about fighters, but with Dan, 35 years old, big fan favourite, went on that incredible run to win his European title, then fought Josh Buatsi in a great fight, came back against Hervé Sepp, who, by the way, was a fantastic amateur and is a good fighter, but definitely subpar performance from Dan. But now he goes into a really interesting fight. Louis Edmondson is a guy that's been talked about for a while. A great amateur record, managed by Billy Joe Saunders. They're really behind him. He's only ever fought an 8-rounder before, but he's considered very, very talented. So it's almost like this meeting of careers. You know, you've got Dan Azeez who's been at the top. Has he still got it? Is he going to show his class? And we've got the unknown Louis Edmondson, who has all the promise in the world to be a fantastic light heavyweight, fighting for a British title. It's almost, in a way, it's a bit of a crossroads fight, a must-win fight for both, but a great fight that again is one that people won't be able to predict. And obviously, Dan is someone I've been with for a long time, someone I'm very close to. Would love to see him put in a great performance, but equally, Louis has got his big opportunity now, and it's like, go on, son. You know, this is what you've been working for. This is what you've been calling for. It's your time. It's your time to perform as well.
We can't talk about light heavyweights on this card without talking about Anthony Yarde. What does it mean to be promoting him for this fight? Ralph Fielkans has just been announced as his opponent. Talk us through what it's going to be like to work with Anthony and that fight in particular.
Yeah, he's another guy that's come with a lot of scrutiny. I've seen a lot of scrutiny around his opponents, given previous opponents. Look, Ralph Fielkans is coming off a fabulous knockout win. And has a great record, and is considered a very good fighter. Is it someone that Anthony Yarde should deal with? Absolutely. Is it someone where he needs to show where he's at? Absolutely. Has he 't his eyes on the Buatsi fight, which is one of the biggest fights in British boxing? 100%. But he's got to go out there and perform. And yeah, I'm delighted to be promoting him. I think he's a phenomenal talent. He's fighting close to his hometown. He's another star that comes with big attention. But he'll feel the pressure now, especially given what's gone on, to put on a performance on Saturday night that really sets the division, puts the division on notice, and builds what could be a massive fight with Joshua Buatsi.
And you mentioned Buatsi there. There's been a lot of talk this week, and I wanted to ask you to set the record straight. People are saying that Buatsi is moving on from Boxxer and potentially signing with Queensberry. Can you offer any insight into the situation there? Yeah,
absolutely not. I think that's been cleared up now. I think Josh has cleared that up himself. So we promote Joshua Buatsi. We've got a fantastic relationship with him. We've got him now to the interim world champion. We're off to the convention in Puerto Rico next week with the WBO to see what happens next. And I don't know. I don't have a clue where that came from, but it's been dealt with now.
And so is the target, because obviously we're coming off the undisputed light heavyweight championship fight from last weekend, is the immediate target for Buatsi fighting the winner of that, or is it fighting Yarde? Because there's talk of a rematch for the Beterbiev-Bivol fight. Are you thinking wait that out and perhaps make Buatsi Yarde in the meantime?
Correct. We were always concerned that there would be a rematch for our own selfish sake with Bivol Beterbiev, and I do expect them to be one. That means their belts are tied up, but it means that it makes way for what was always the plan. One of the biggest fights in British boxing against Anthony Yarde. I do expect that to be next. I do expect them to be in the ring on Saturday night, as long as Anthony Yarde can do the business. And we look forward to a huge fight at the start of the year. It's a fact, look, their names have been synonymous with each other since they turned over. There's always been this comparison. There's always been this talk. There's always been this constant who's better narrative that's gone throughout their careers. And we want to see them get it on in their prime, in their peak. And I would definitely say that they are both in their prime, definitely still in their peak. And to do it for an interim world title would be absolutely massive.
And you talk about absolutely massive fights, world titles. I just wanted to throw it forward a little bit quickly. Chris Billam-Smith getting that shot, Zurdo Ramirez, title unification. It doesn't get any bigger than that. What does it mean to be a part of putting that fight on?
Oh, it's huge. I think looking at where we've come from, and we've been the underdog. Chris Billam-Smith has been the underdog. We picked him up where most people didn't want to know. They didn't want to take him to Bournemouth. They didn't believe he was a headline fighter. We took him to Bournemouth. We started against Isaac Chamberlain with that fantastic fight on the South Coast. And it just snowballed. And we created a star, and he created himself a star. We went from 3,000 to 5,000 to 15,000 to winning the world title to defending it. So then going to Richard Riakporhe. It's just been a hell of a journey, an incredible journey. Couldn't happen to a nicer man, a nicer ambassador for the sport, a greater team. I think he's a credit to Shane McGuigan and really shows how good Shane McGuigan is as a trainer. But now to be here from where we were on the brink of unification is absolutely huge. And I think it's another fight where we'll probably go in the slight underdog, but believe me, he is the favourite. And I think any boxing fan now that bets against Chris Billam-Smith should have been proven wrong enough times now to side with him on November 16th. It's a massive fight, and yeah, definitely one of the best journeys that we've been involved in.
Absolutely. And just finally, I wanted to ask this weekend, Adam Azim, Ohara Davies, can I just get a prediction from you for that fight?
I expect Adam Azim knockout. I'm not going to predict a round. Anything can happen, but he's had a great camp. He's matured massively outside of the ring. I expect him to have matured big time in the ring as well. I think we'll see a boy become a man on Saturday night.